นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening. We are now almost at the end of the annual range retreat, monastic range retreat, which you'll find Buddhist monks and nuns all over the world hold to. 3 months during this period, July, August, September. This year it finishes in 2 days' time. On the full moon of Bodhisattva. We actually call that day, in the Buddhist calendar, we call it Mahapawarana Day, because the monks come together to perform Sangha Kamma, one of the regular practices we do. Normally on the full moon day, new moon day, we listen to a recitation of the Patimokkha, the monk's rules. But on this day, Mahapawarana, we perform a small ritual, it's called inviting admonition, because we've spent at least 3 months together, and perhaps longer. It's possible that living together, sometimes we notice faults or weaknesses or mistakes in the behavior of others around us. And it's also possible that we ourselves make mistakes. Sometimes we break a rule without realizing, or sometimes even realizing. And we want to learn, that's why we're here. So one part of learning is getting admonition, meaning feedback and comment from your fellow monastics. So when we say Mahapawarana, we say it's a day when you're opening yourself up for teaching from others. It doesn't necessarily mean on that day they'll give you a teaching or say anything, but it's actually a part of what we're doing, a part of the way we learn and train as Buddhist monks, is that we open ourselves up to be taught by other monks, and for us to also teach other monks. We help each other in this way. So it's partly just an attitude, cultivating the attitude of living together, learning from each other, admitting that we have faults, sometimes we have to rectify them, and so on. The idea is that when you do it in a ceremonial form, Mahapawarana, like in 2 days' time, we'll do it as a ceremony. It just formalizes it. It makes sure that the monks, if they're going to depart and go to other monasteries, other places, that they can depart with a good feeling, knowing that they've invited other monks to bring up anything that may be seen, heard or suspected that was wrong or inappropriate or a mistake, to clear the air. Because one of the big parts of human suffering is we're always carrying around memories and grudges and stuff to do with other people that we've lived with or worked with, that we haven't rectified. So it's one simple method to help encourage this attitude of learning and helping each other to grow and to improve, and partly that comes from recognizing faults and mistakes as well. And it clears the air. When you do have a grudge or a bit of bad feeling towards another person, it's a bit like a debt, isn't it? Something in your mind that your mind keeps returning to. So you live with someone or work with someone and you're annoyed with them, maybe you feel they did something wrong. Every time you think of them. Anyway, I was talking about Pawarana and the importance of clearing the air, not carrying bad memories, bad feeling, grudges around towards other people. Especially important in a monastic situation because you live together all the time. But it still applies in the home, family, workplace, and other situations. These are just basic truths of life. And if you build up a sort of grudge against someone, bad feeling, it's like a debt, isn't it? Your mind keeps returning to that. It's like an unpaid debt that you're not yet free of. So the Pawarana ceremony is just this formalization of how to deal with that skillfully. As I said, it's also an attitude you develop over and over again through your practice. The willingness to receive teachings from others, to give teachings, to comment sometimes in a respectful, kind way. It has to come from metta and goodwill. But it's a part of the practice so that you can free your mind from debts. So that's what we do at the end of the rains. But really, nothing changes that much. The end of the rains, the beginning, the end, it's the same. We carry on our practice, cultivating the Noble Eightfold Path, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, reflecting on the same old things. In the case of Pawarana Day, well, it's a good day to reflect on the difference between wholesome and unwholesome behavior of body, speech and mind. Because they're clearly different, what we call kusala and akusala. Wholesome behavior of body, speech and mind, so wholesome actions, wholesome speech, wholesome thoughts and intentions are accompanied by pleasant feeling generally, feeling of ease, and lead to good results. Whereas unwholesome, unskillful acts of body, speech and mind go in the other direction, create pain. So if you are holding on to a grudge or bad feeling towards someone else, well that's pain for you. And this isn't to say other people may not have done something to provoke you or hurt you or harm you in some way, or someone you love. But it's still going to be causing pain in your mind if you're thinking about it or thinking about that person in a negative way. So this is a big part of practice in daily life. That's why we keep precepts, practice mindfulness in the beginning, it's just so that we can be more aware of what we're thinking, what our intentions are, what we're saying, what we're doing from moment to moment through our day. And be alert for where we may be falling into unskillful ways, because it leads to suffering, leads to pain. And these small ceremonies, rituals, they can help us, just remind us what we're doing and why. Perhaps the more deeper reflection is, as I was saying earlier in the meditation, on the impermanent nature of mental states, mental phenomena, body, the physical phenomena, the mental phenomena that make up this human being, this human person we have here. The Buddha said we're all friends in birth, aging, sickness and death. We have that one thing in common. Anyone who is here listening to this talk has a body. You were born once, you're here. You're aging, one day you won't be here, one day you'll be passed away, you'll be dead. Every single person in the world has that in common. The other things are more superficial, aren't they? People's beliefs and religions and politics and all the different things that divide us and cause us strife. Actually, the commonality of birth, aging, sickness and death is perhaps more important. That's something the Buddha picked up on. So anyone who's here has a body, has a mind. With a body, you have to deal with the difficulties of having a human body which is subject to growth, aging, sickness, heat and cold, hunger, thirst, itches, pains, all kinds of stuff. You don't know exactly how it's all going to come up in your life, but you by now you probably got the point, is a human body does give you a fair amount of discomfort. That's something you have to put up with, endure. And you can't always get away from every kind of discomfort, even though we would like to. And we try to make our life as comfortable, convenient as possible, have everything we like in just the way we like it. But still, you can't avoid some pain. So that's a human body. Gives you some pain, gives you pleasure as well, and we generally seek a lot of pleasure to get away from the pain. And the mind the same. Mind's subject to pleasant moods, happiness and unhappiness, unpleasant moods, back and forth. The way the Buddha talked about human body, called a human body, divided it into the 5 khandhas, 5 groups, 5 aggregates. So you hear about this over and over again in talks, or read about it in the suttas. 5 aggregates are form, the physical part, feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, and neither pleasant nor unpleasant feeling. Perceptions, sanya, mental formations, thinking, volitions, what we call sankhara, and then vijnana, sense consciousness. And all the people in the world, everyone in the world has this in common. We all have 5 khandhas. What the Buddha pointed out in a very direct, simple statement is that clinging to these 5 khandhas is a basis for suffering. They become a source of suffering for us because they become burdensome, heavy, and a cause for us not to get what we want and to often get what we don't want. I just mentioned the body, and it gives us a lot of pain, discomfort. The feeling khandha regularly not giving us what we want. We want pleasure, but we get pain. Or we get some pleasure, but we can't keep it. Perceptions are more subtle, but they're a big cause of our suffering because we label things and remember things in certain ways. And so your memories and your perceptions can trigger all kinds of suffering very quickly and very easily. Simple one might be just a place. You might associate a certain place, a physical location, with some kind of suffering. Maybe it's somewhere where you had some suffering before, and you just remember it in that way, even though the suffering is not really connected to the place necessarily. It's just your memory of it. And so every time you go near there or think of that place, already you feel tense or unhappy. And because perceptions, memories change, they kind of can fool us, trick us, a bit unreliable in that way. Mental formations the same. Our thoughts, as we know, thoughts can be very annoying, disturbing. And what you have to be careful of is once you start thinking something, well, you tend to go on and keep thinking that, or do something, or say something based on those thoughts. That's why we call them volitions. It's where karma originates, it's through the thinking and the intending of the mind. But it's also impermanent. You don't have one thought in your mind all day long. Even just during this simple talk now, it's not going to be just one thought over and over again. You'll be thinking many things, no doubt. And that also leads you on to do things. Where does all this doing and action that we get involved with every day through our life come from? Well, begins usually as a thought, an impulse, an intention. And then sense consciousness, the doorways for sense objects, sight, sound, taste, smell, touch, constantly arising, passing away, swapping over. So these are the 5 khandhas, 5 aggregates. All of us have them. All of us, if we attach to the 5 aggregates through delusion, through ignorance, they start to bring us suffering, a feeling of unhappiness, pain, mental pain, physical pain, discomfort, disappointment, and so on. Ajahn Chah used to say, if you could just leave your khandhas alone, there's no trouble, no problem. He says, a bit like a thorn on a bush in the forest. You know, we have lots of thorny kinds of plants in the forest here. He said, if you don't go into the forest and mess with those thorns and those bushes, you just leave them alone, well, there's no problem, is there? There's no suffering. But if you go walking in the forest and then start messing around or treading on or getting involved with thorns, you'll get hurt. He said the 5 khandhas are much the same. If you don't mess with them, you don't attach to them and cling to them and take them as self, they won't cause you suffering. Which is both a very subtle point that only really an arahant, someone who's attained full liberation, nibbana, will understand. But at the same time, it's also a kind of fairly straightforward concept. You know, if you can be aware and observe your 5 khandhas, the more you can do that, the more peaceful you'll feel, because you're just observing them rather than grasping and clinging to them. Sometimes we can do that, and particularly when you're practicing mindfulness meditation, or just you're particularly mindful in your day, you'll notice you can cope with different feelings of pleasure and pain, different thoughts, different aspects of your 5 khandhas arising and passing away, but you can cope with it without creating much extra or further suffering out of them. One way Ajahn Chah used to talk about the 5 khandhas, he said, well, contemplate them. They are the basis of clinging. When you cling to them, they cause you suffering. So to help stop clinging so tightly to them, just imagine that they're dead already. You know, this term, dying before you die, or as if dead already. And it's a subtle term because sometimes people think, well, if I've got to practice seeing something as dead already or dead before it's really dead, sounds a bit cold or ominous. Maybe it doesn't bring up the right state of mind. But what he was getting people to see, just in a very simple way, to contemplate, to see, well, your body and mind are impermanent, and they're not going to be the same forever. Your feelings change all the time. Even the body is constantly changing through aging and different processes going on. Your mind is changing all the time, the emotions, the feelings, the thoughts you have, the memories you have. Is I get to see the body and mind, or the 5 khandhas, as if dying, get to see them as dead already, before they're actually dead. You know one day you will die, but at the moment you can also see them, it's in their nature that they are arising and ceasing, or arising and passing away every moment. That's seeing death before death actually comes to you. This is a very useful reflection to develop, because death is certain for all of us. One day we're all going to die, and it brings up so much suffering, the thought of it, the worry about it, the death of our loved ones, separation from them, our own death, separation from all that we love and like. This is definitely going to happen. So how do we prepare for that, and how do we deal with it? For someone who's already considered this and seen their own 5 khandhas as impermanent, arising, ceasing, or being born and dying, you might say, all through the day, they see that anyway, or know that, well then, what you might call the real death, the end of your life, is just one moment in that process of arising and ceasing for the 5 khandhas. There's a moment when your 5 khandhas, as they are now, are together, meaning you're still alive. And there'll be another moment when they're no longer together, when you die, for whatever reason. Old age, sickness, injury, accident. Doesn't matter in this sense. At some point, the 5 khandhas, we say, they break apart. They can no longer function together. And we call that death, but actually they're constantly arising and ceasing, changing all the time through your life anyway. if you bring yourself to notice that more and more, then you can see the actual final death, the one that makes us feel so scared or angry or unhappy. It's just another moment in that whole process of arising and ceasing. And sometimes when we're with monks who have practiced developing the Noble Eightfold Path all through their life, particularly mindfulness and investigation and vipassana, and you see them, you're with them when they get right, literally to the last moments of their life. They say much, they talk about this in much the same way. That, they may be suffering some pain, physical pain of course, but they've learned to see it as just the arising and ceasing of the khandhas. So there's not a lot of stress or worry. For some monks, maybe no worry at all, no fear at all. And literally the 5 khandhas, they're just so used to looking at them and seeing them arise, pass away, one breath in, one breath out, feelings arising and ceasing, sensations rising and ceasing. They're so good at that and they've done it so much, they really are not too bothered or upset or suffering with the idea of final death. Of course, when we talk about death, what we call marananusati, mindfulness directed to the theme of death, often brings up the question of, well, what happens after death? And some people believe in next life, rebirth, some people don't. But Ajahn Chah used to say, well, you can really set that thought aside. If it's a doubt that's bothering you, doubt about Buddhism and the Buddhist teachings is bothering you, just come back to the present moment, day by day, and observe what's going on in your 5 khandhas day by day. The way your body is changing, aging day by day. Feelings are arising, passing away, moment by moment through the day. Thoughts and memories coming and going through the day. Just observe that, and you can see the transient nature of these 5 khandhas more and more clearly, to the point where you have no doubt about the fact that these 5 khandhas are impermanent and subject to change. They don't remain the same. Doesn't mean to say there's no connection or link back to, from today back to yesterday, or what will be going on in the 5 khandhas tomorrow is not affected by today. It is. But it's not exactly the same, in a few hours from now is not going to be exactly the same as now. How you're feeling, what's going on now is not the same as what happened yesterday, and what will be happening tomorrow will not be the same either. That much you can become very clear, observe very clearly, very closely, and really come to see that is the nature of these 5 khandhas. What we call a person, or what we tend to call myself, and here we're getting into the kind of crux of the Buddhist teaching, is really a process of different physical, mental phenomena arising and passing away. You've probably already heard talks on that, read books on that, and most of us have to hear many talks, read many books, listen to the words of the Buddha many times. And that's okay, because our delusion is so thick, and to break through it, we do have to train and educate ourselves a lot. But little by little, hopefully, it's becoming more obvious to you that yes, what we call a self, me, mine, myself, may not actually be anything very solid. As you practice contemplating, observing, whether you're practicing mindfulness of breathing or any other meditation technique, you cannot help but start to notice the changing nature of body, mind phenomena over time. This is what we call wisdom, insight growing up, and this can help you to really free your mind from a lot of suffering, because this is the way things are, this is the truth. So if you don't, on those days when you don't quite get what you want, some outcome that you were desiring, to do with work, family, relationships, health, your mind in meditation, it doesn't matter. There'll be those days when things don't go the way you want, but if you've been observing impermanence, the impermanent nature of your own khandhas, 5 khandhas, there's just another bit of that impermanence coming up, isn't it? You didn't get what you want, it didn't happen, or things didn't happen the way you want, or you didn't get what you want. You have some pleasure, some pain. This all becomes part of the contemplation. And sometimes can even be quite enjoyable, because you're now looking at your experience of these 5 khandhas from a place of learning, observing, learning about them, rather than just being kind of following along and being stuck. Happy when things go well and your 5 khandhas are satisfied and getting what they want, and then disappointed and angry when you don't get what you want, rather than going along like that, kind of up and down, or your mind sort of all over the place. Just learning to observe, it's like this. You get what you want, it feels like this, things go well, that's good. Nothing wrong with getting what you want, usually, as long as it's wholesome. But then sometimes you don't get what you want, or what you want doesn't last. But it's all part of the changing phenomena of these 5 khandhas. And when you start looking at it in this way, a lot of the stress is reduced. It's like, it's like this. When you don't get what you want, it's like this. So even painful feelings when you're ill or something is not right, it may bring you some painful feelings. But if you remember to do your contemplation, painful feelings have arisen, okay. It's hard to enjoy, I have to be patient with it, and maybe you can quickly deal with those painful feelings, get rid of them. Sometimes you can, but sometimes you can't. But you can learn from them and observe them as part of the khandhas arising and passing away. Painful experiences, painful mental experiences, things not quite going how you would like, getting what you want but then losing it again, on and on it goes. Whether it's physical or pain or mental, it gives you a whole new perspective, a new way of looking at your experience as a human being, rather than just following the emotional reactions all the time. You can also say, this is what the khandhas do. When I grasp and attach to the khandhas, when I don't get what I want, there's some pain, physical pain or mental pain maybe. It's like this, a whole set of thoughts come up, it affects me, affects my body. Our mind can affect our body, can't it? Just the emotions and the moods you get caught into affect you physically as well, don't they? You start to notice that, how the khandhas are, one khandha is influencing another. So, when you're tense, because you're building up some stress, some tension in your life from work or a relationship or health or something, how does that affect the rupa khandha, the physical body? You may notice, when you're tense, you clench your fists, you grind your teeth together, your muscles become rigid perhaps. You may find you have digestive problems, you may get headaches, all kinds of things prompted by your mood, your state of mind. This is the 5 khandhas doing their thing. And at first you just say, I'm stressed about my job, it's just giving me endless headaches or worries, which is true on one level. But on a deeper level you can also observe, this is the khandhas at work. When you keep thinking in a certain way, a negative thought, fear, anxiety or anguish about something, it will also affect your physical well-being, your body. It will affect feelings, physical and mental feelings. It will develop certain perceptions, certain thoughts. So maybe you're actually, the more you think in a certain way, say it's a negative way, the more likely you are to think in that way again and again and again. The khandhas are like this. They're kind of affecting each other all the time, but as you start introducing this way of looking at your experience, using the Buddhist kind of terminology, but also this Buddhist way of dividing experience into form, feeling, memories, thought formations, and sense consciousness, bringing up more mindfulness and then investigating, contemplating. You can also see, this is how the khandhas work. They're a process, and painful feeling affects me in this way and maybe leads me to think in a certain way, do certain things, experience the body in a certain way. Pleasant feeling goes differently. You're training yourself to analyze your experience using the 5 khandhas rather than just reacting. So it can be quite enjoyable even to do this. Even sometimes suffering can become enjoyable when you make it an object of contemplation. Because at the very least you're looking at it from a better place, from a place of wisdom or understanding, or you're going towards more wisdom, more understanding. And don't forget, dukkha is our best teacher. Suffering, the suffering of the khandhas, is our best teacher, because it's teaching us why we have to let go of them. These are the thorns of life, why you shouldn't be walking around in the forest, walking through thorn bushes, is because it hurts. And so when you notice how something is hurting because you're grabbing hold of it, identifying with it as self, then you learn to stop doing that. You stop walking on the thorns, treading on the thorns, when you realize they're painful. Much of the time we don't even realize. That's the whole point. So the Buddha is giving us a tool and a technique to realize for ourselves more clearly what's going on. To bring up the mindfulness, turn attention inwards, start to analyze, contemplate the 5 khandhas, and you learn and you see the process of cause and effect. Thoughts affect us in one way, feelings affect us, what's going on with the body affects us. And of course, add into the mix other people, well, they're also affecting us. So some people we're attracted to, some people we're against, we don't like them, situations, people, and they're affecting our khandhas as well. So there's external inputs, internal inputs. A lot of the time it's a real mess and we don't even notice. So if you practice meditation regularly, bring up more mindfulness and learn to reflect in this way using the basis of the Buddhist teachings, read about, learn about the 5 khandhas, you can save yourself a lot of suffering quite quickly. You're now looking at your experience in a more objective, detached way, and can see one thing leads to another. You'll notice things that you didn't see before. How maybe you do get upset in certain places or certain situations, or how you are following cravings, certain desires, when there's certain kinds of impingement, sense impingement, you get caught into desire and indulge in that desire perhaps, and so on and on it goes. But now you can learn about this. And through that learning and observing the way things are, you can also see it's possible to put things down or let them go. So the 5 khandhas, the Buddha said, when we grasp them as self, that grasping, that clinging, brings a heaviness to the mind. Feel heavy. But who's doing that? Well, we are. The uneducated, the untrained mind does it without realizing. But now you're practicing, you can stop doing it, you can change. Start putting the 5 khandhas down, the burden of them. They'll still be there, but you're no longer grasping them so tightly as a self. That's our aim. So today I just talked a little bit about Pawarana, the end of the range retreat and the meaning of that, and then some reflections on impermanence and particularly the 5 khandhas. And whether you're in the range retreat or outside the range retreat, keep reflecting on the impermanence of the 5 khandhas, and this will bring you a lot of insight, understanding that can really free you from suffering. So I'll leave you with those reflections tonight.